to the seminar today. If you haven't already, help yourself to coffee and cookies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to our guest speaker, Dr. Celeste Snowber. She's from Simon Fraser University, and she is participating in Dr. Catherine Ricketts' listening lab. Sorry.
Labyrinth.
That too. It's no longer a mystery. You can read it all about it online on our education.
Thank you.
Dr. Snowber is a dancer, writer, and educator, and much more. So today, in this performance, she will explore how the body, dance, poetry, and humor are sites of inquiry for exploring notions of belonging and connection to her Armenian heritage. So please join with me in welcoming Dr.
Hello. You're so, I feel like I should just be at your table talking to you. I mean, like,
You are welcome.
it seems so, but I'll stand up. Anyways, it's lovely to be here. It's wonderful to be here. So thank you. So first, I just want to give you a little background. I don't know, does anyone know anything about Armenia or Armenian heritage or?
Well, a little bit about the Armenian genocide.
The Armenian genocide. Okay. So I'll just give you some background how this whole inquiry and kind of process started and continues to go. Is that my mother was born in 1912 in Armenia. And my mother had me quite older. She used to say, if Lucille Ball can have a child at 43, so can I. So anyways, she had me older. And so she must have left Armenia when she was just a baby, probably 1914. The genocide happened in 1915. And my mother told me every day of my life, I heard a lecture about the genocide and the Turks killing the Armenians, and there's 1.5 million Armenians killed, and there was a lot of input about being Armenian. So let me just say, my mother was scandalous. She did not marry an Armenian. She married an Irishman, and she told him every day as well. The problem is that you're Irish, you're not Armenian, you don't understand the suffering. So she left her Armenian family and moved outside the main Boston area where little Armenia was. So I didn't get raised with all my cousins, I didn't go to Armenian church, I didn't learn the language. So I didn't really grow up in an Armenian culture, except that my mother was Armenian and she cooked Armenian, and I just thought all mothers just cooked with eggplant and peppers and danced in the kitchen and did art and was sensuous and passionate. I just thought that was part of the 50s, but it wasn't. I did learn. So I did not really care about being Armenian, and many years ago when I had just finished graduate school, I was just a young thing, I was like 27, I moved from Boston to Regina. And then Assiniboia. And so I was in Saskatchewan for 5 years. I never met one Armenian my whole time. I really wasn't that interested in about what Armenian identity was. But as the years went by and I was in therapy for 20 years about my issues with my mother, I realized it was just because I was Armenian and I really didn't need all that therapy. And what happened is at the same time there was the time I was starting my doctorate. I was also really dedicating my life to a lot of improvisation in dance. And what was coming up in my dances was this thing about being Armenian. And words were coming up. And the words that came up was, they killed the poets, the priests, and the intellectuals first. And that just really caught me, and I don't even remember hearing that. And so I thought, they killed the poets and the intellectuals first? I just heard about the genocide, but I never really researched it. So, about 20 years ago, when I was 40, I started researching it. And it was just horrific. It was not just a genocide, it was just horrific how they did it, what they did, and I don't want to go into, it's traumatic. And so I realized that there is a trauma that is held in the body, that must have been held in my mother's body. So she was this amazing woman of color and passion, and she'd give me, the Bhagavad Gita to read, and Kant and Plato, and she'd bring me to the Museum of Modern Art to see Kandinsky, and then she would rage and scream and go into rages, and I never quite understood it. And then when I started understanding that there's a second generation trauma that can happen, there's a lot been written about that in Holocaust studies. There's not so much in Armenian genocide because it still isn't recognized. And so that something not being recognized is a re-traumatization. And I have this huge sense of, in my life about having things to be just, having justice. That's why it's very difficult to be in the academy. There's not a lot of justice all the time. So I So this is just the background, and of course I have notes, and I never go by my notes. I try. This is why I can't do PowerPoints. You see, I don't. Yeah. So there is these things coming up about being Armenian, and at the same time, I'm starting my academic career, and I'm really dedicating myself to integrating the body as a way of knowing. I'm immersed in phenomenology and curriculum studies, which values lived curriculum, values the lived experience, it values the emergent curriculum, and I started to integrate the body as a place of finding out about what was going on. So as I said many times, we are bodies, we don't have bodies, and I'm often more interested in what I don't know than what I know. What I know bores me. You know, after a while, I know that. What is it I don't know? What is this that's in my cells, right? So the last 20 years, I've had this really almost obsessive, I'm trying to understand about what this means to be Armenian. Of course, my parents are long gone. They died when both of them died from 8 months from each other when I was in Assiniboia in Saskatchewan. And so I had close cousins, Armenian cousins, but they're all far, far away. I never met an Armenian in Canada. I didn't know there were such things. But I finally went to Armenia and found, and then when I was in Armenia, someone said, oh, there's someone in Vancouver. Anyways, so what I'm gonna do throughout this kind of performative talk is to read you some of the poetry that has been emerging over the last several years. And the reason that I feel I need to go to poetry as a place of inquiry and the body as a place of inquiry as well is that there's nothing that holds these kinds of memories and understanding. And I have to go to where there's spaces in between the words. So I'm going to read you this first poem, Earth Traces. She's compelled with traces of identity where the tales were born, a land of both beauty and genocide, not for facts, the orality of story, the lived history she heard as a child of diaspora. She aches for the smell of earth, textures of mountains, color of skin, the old country birthland of her mother. Geography holds its own story, a narrative of knowing. Hidden in the scent of mud and sky, bread and plants, fruit half ripened on Armenian soil, an ache for land from whence one came. A longing deeper than under, overstanding visceral call to touch and feel, hear the earth's song and lament. So I've been very fortunate in my academic career that I've been under this umbrella of arts-based research that had happened over the last 20 years, and I was in the beginnings of this with many others, and there was this room to explore the connection between the personal and the universal, because we are found in one another's stories, and there is this sense that this isn't just a bunch of autobiographical yaya journaling to just find out yourself, but there really is a sense is that when we go in the depth of our own lived experience, our own living inquiry, and our lives are researching our lives, there is something that then we offer others. And we are found in those stories. And so this relationship between the personal and the universal, the poetic and the political, has really and has underlined to me a lot of the work and methodologies in arts-based research, which has been an umbrella for performative inquiry, embodied inquiry, artography, poetic inquiry, all the kinds of ways that we integrate the arts not only as a way of writing up research, but as really as a way of investigating our lives, our students' lives, our knowing. And so it was very fortunate for me that there was this, there was this umbrella. Longing resides in the marrow, in the cells, in the fiber, for a land I did not know. Geography has its own terrain, a territory of the unfamiliar and the familiar. She constantly spoke of the land that she left and did not know. Even the paper flowers she made and sold on the street in Cambridge, Massachusetts, could not redeem the aftermath of what was written in her cells and bones. I am a child in between borders of land and sea. The place of viscera where souls of feet are souls. The earth is my body. My body, the earth. Longing is a passage not to be fixed, but to be lived into from in between. So these themes of longing and belonging were coming out of these dances. And so that really prompted me to write about that, to have a whole dissertation come out of that, to have a whole body of work about these relationships that longing, the word longing is in belonging. And I've always had this sense of longing for this, longing for that, longing, and wrestling with it as if it was something to be fixed, rather than seeing that longing was a place of home, which has far more peace in it, far more resonance for me. And but I really did long to go on that land. What would that land have been like? Now, they wouldn't have gone back because Armenia then absolved into Russia, so they couldn't go back. Nor they would want to go back because either you left or you died or were put into a harem, or so nobody went back. So I got a small grant many, many years ago to reclaim Armenian identity through the arts. And I went back to Armenia to study Armenian dance and Armenian music for a small amount of time. And because I feel like the land holds a memory. And it was fascinating to me that I couldn't even find the same Armenian food that I grew up with. But when I was in Istanbul a couple years ago, I did. So there's a whole very interesting thing, So I will read some poems from out of that, but I'm going to read you a couple more poems, and I'm going to put on some music as part of that as well. So this is an artist who I really love, who's an Armenian, but it's contemporary. So you get a flavor for Armenian music with a contemporary bent, who is Armen Shakmakian. Everyone Armenian with his IAN. When you grow up Armenian, everyone tells you 500, I must have been told 1 million times, Shir is part Armenian. So-and-so is part Armenian. So-and-so is, so-and-so is part Armenian. It's just, you hear it so many times. The only possibility you can is to reject the culture, because it's like, it's in my face. Will you please leave me alone? I don't care, And my kids say, I was telling Catherine, my opera son says to me, I have just enough Armenian to make it work for me, Mother, just to have a little exotic look, Gosh, okay. So this is the duduk, who, Catherine, you were getting pieces by Jivan Gasparian, and he's playing the duduk with Armen Shakamakian.
Oh, great.
And I have created a dance piece to this I've done for years. called Longing. But I'm going to read you this poem, a couple poems. In praise of the kitchen studio, she created beauty in strife, aftermath of genocide. She escaped, but the heart does not cease to know the lament of the forefathers and foremothers of the old country. At 11, she made paper roses and sold them in Cambridge, Massachusetts, brought the reapings to her family. At 73, the year before her death, she still was bringing flowers to life after my father died. Nothing could stop her arranging living petals into modern art. Our kitchen was transformed into an art studio, either cooking with color or creating color through sculptural objects in plant life. I have kept the tradition of my artist mother, knocked out a wall in my kitchen dining area, put a wooden floor in and doubles as a dance studio. Kitchens are places of love, creating food, art, dance, exchange of hearts through flesh. And always, always there shall be flowers. There is strife too in kitchens, tears and conflict, but connections usually win out. The ripeness of beauty over a lifetime. We are made and remade in the kitchen studio, colors of soul brought to brilliance in ordinary living. So I grew up with my mother constantly making flower arrangements in the kitchen. She was a modern artist, and she'd bring steel and plexiglass in the whole kitchen, and she'd be always creating. And it's like, and she says, I couldn't understand why she didn't make cookies. And years later, my son Lucas said to me when he was young, "Mom, can't you just write? Can't you make cookies instead of writing books like the other mothers?" But I also heard these stories about my grandmother's kitchen, and her being in my grandmother's kitchen, and there was these stories, and this totally fascinates me. Hold on. I've been haunted by this story because by the time I was really interested in finding out about my heritage, my mom was gone. And so I'd hear about this story of them being in my grandmother's kitchen. Can you still see me? And sit around the table would be my mother and her sister, who was a singer, and Hyman Bloom, who's a very, very well-known Armenian visual artist, Alan Hovhaness, a very, very well-known Armenian composer, and Ravi Shankar. And there was this little international group of artists, and they would go to my grandmother's kitchen. And then they would go to Newbury Street on Boston and have talks about art, and, it's like Paris, but it's like right during the war, right, And it always fascinated me. I always felt like my mother had the talent way beyond me. She was just her talent was way beyond, but she never had those opportunities. The women stayed home and make sure they, were secretaries and paid for their brothers' education. So here they're hanging around with these amazing artists, and they've gone on to have international career. I got obsessed by. I wrote Ravi Shankar, and of course they just sent me a thing back and saying yes, of course, he was with Alan Hovhaness. My mother wasn't included, but I was hoping. So that this whole aspect of the kitchen and creating in the kitchen has been this amazing theme for me, because the good part, the redeemable part, is the cooking, right? And tonight I'll do a piece called Beneath the Skin of Plum Black that I'll dance and read. But it's that everything was color. Everything had color. You had to cook with color. And even to this day, if I don't cook with color, I feel guilty. It's like, because they also put the spice of guilt into every single soup, or geragu. If you're not guilty now, let's have a little more guilt. I just like guilt. If you don't have enough guilt, we'll put it in, because you should be guilty for everything. So, there we go.
I love that, the spice of guilt.
It is the spice. I think I have a poem about that somewhere. The spice. It is. It's like a spice. It's like put in a little cinnamon, put a little pepper, salt. Let's throw in some guilt, And so that's why I joke, and I say I was in therapy for 20 years, and I realized, all my Armenian cousins, we have the same issue. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a disease. We all have it, And it's also very connected to you're coming to a new country and you have to make a life for yourself. You don't even have a country to go back to, right? You have to, so it was scandalous for my mother to be an artist. I mean, you're supposed to go, on and be, respectable things, especially, but she never really followed anything properly, either do I. I could just say I inherited it. Okay, so several years ago, I went back to the land because I had this sense that the land there must be a memory there. What I was so surprised about was that it was so exquisitely gorgeous. I had just heard the horror. Now, most of it, like where my mother was born, is not there. I mean, it's in Turkey, and those lands are all they're so fraught with, discord. But I'm going to read you a couple of these poems. Stone to stone, I am letting you wash over me, Armenia, stone to stone, Hachkar to Hachkar. Hachkars are stones which have engravings in them, and they have them outside all the monasteries, and they're very ancient. Lavash to lavash. Oh, lavash. I can't even get through my poem without explaining it. This is why you're supposed to have PowerPoints, you see. So lavash is bread that's very, very thin. Maybe you've had it in other cultures. And when I was in Armenia, we went to a little village, and the oven is right in the ground, and then it's like in a round thing. Hachkar to Hachkar, lavash to lavash, thousands of miles away, I still come home to your spring, ancient and green, and dip in the waters of a baptized land. I live between worlds, what I have carried within my flesh all these years, and the country who birthed the Armen soul in my olive skin. Until you touch. He said, perhaps until you physically touch 1,000 places on the land, you will find your roots. And this is what I know. My hands, my feet must feel the curve of stone, the smell of earth, the sound of birds, the taste of lavash, the gesture of dancing hands to feel the place I know has been within. It is not enough to long, but to have the flesh come in contact with the memories creation carries. For it is the land which holds a truth that bears the scars and lines of loss and longing, eruptions of joy, a beauty which calls forth contact. So I've been really fascinated for a long time about the connection between land, place, and the body, and memory, and a pedagogy of place. And I've also been reclaiming, I know this talks about being an Armenian, but can't not say about my Irish heritage. So I've been also gone back to Ireland, and my father was Irish. And there's something about being on the land. And when I was in Ireland this summer, it was so poignant to me that I never understood about the Irish. I never got it till I was there. I mean, my poor father had no room because my mother kept telling him, you're not Armenian, Frank. Why, you can't understand. But the Irish had huge suffering and huge famine and a forced famine. And so there's something, I'm also very deeply attracted to stones. The stones in Armenia are very similar to the Celtic stones in Ireland, and it's always fascinating. Of course, my father used to say, those Irish, they gotten everywhere. So it's always interesting to me, these migration patterns, and we are all mixed up anyways, So I'm going to read you one of the Irish poems from this summer. I'm very excited. This is my new book. I'm trying to learn how to be plugged for it. It just came out. On embodied inquiry. And I really wrote it not for the Academy. And I can't find, I can. So this other aspect that's really fascinating to me is that the land and also the body is a threshold. And so a threshold is like this place of like you walk over, but you often walk over into this difference between invisible and visible. The lines are thin. And in a lot of Irish particularly in Celtic mythology and Celtic theology, there's this real connection between the visible and the invisible. And so I'm really curious about this because I know, and it's really informed all of the site-specific work that I've been doing over the last years. So this is called In Between the Syllables. I look for roots in doors and pathways, a hint of a family name, in a village, city, or town in Ireland. Killarney, Roscommon, Galway. Little lies substantial to follow, a wild chase with nothing at the end. What happened to the stories of the great-great-grandfathers, Campbells and McDermotts, who came at age 16 to Brooklyn, time of the potato famine? Who was left, and what swirled in their hearts to leave a country such as this, of stone walls, and ancient sentences rolled in moss and bog, changing light in hills and sea? A rough history and a rough ocean beheld in the terrain where I now journey and find deep hues of resonance, embrace my sassy nature and wild edge. Humor and humus is the ground of this place. My Irish father's eyes are caught in the people as if they were siblings. Roots are beyond the place and within the place. Here is the invisible, honored by the visible, waiting underneath the moist earth to rebody my yearnings to know that love lies in the space in between the syllables of earth, sea, and sky. So when I was just recently there, I just did not understand what happened to these stories. Why didn't they get passed down? Like who left? I figured out who was the one that first left, but it never got passed down. And then when I was at the Famine Museum, I figured, of course it wouldn't get, it's so traumatic, it didn't get passed down. So how does that, but that stays in, and they didn't talk about it. I was in generations, my parents were in generations where they might have talked about some things, but they didn't completely talk about it because they wanted to move on. They came to America, they wanted to move on. In fact, I keep thinking what my father would say about the election. He'd probably just turn over in his grave and let's move on. So this is really, what I guess the main thing I want to share is that I think there's places that are so difficult to really excavate that for me that we need the arts. We need the arts in any form to actually go there and have it be a container because it's horrific. If even just watching the news is horrific. And so for me, this has been this journey to discover and continue to be informed by what it means. And even though I'm a hybrid, and I can't say I've gone through any kind of pain that perhaps my ancestors would be. But this thing about the land is really, that taking the land, I think is for many societies, indigenous populations, that's really deep in people's bones, and it does not get out of their bones. It's like the body knows the loss, So, what time is it?
12:32.
12:32, okay. Okay, so I'm going to just leave you with one more song and a poem, and we can open up for questions, okay?
Perfect.
So there's also incredible amounts of joy in Armenian music. There's haunting qualities, but I really love this piece, and I want to just share it with you. And then I came across it not that long ago, then I wrote a poem as part of it. So Armenian dancing, have you ever seen it? It's a lot of like this. They do all this kind of stuff. And then they do This is called Genoa, I am listening. Haunting notes call me back to a knowing under my skin, deeper than bone. from matter to matter. My mother's matrilineal line, Armenian roots sprouting where melodies alone make more sense in this yearning beyond. Reasons, maps, logic, or time. I recognize myself a returning to home in the chords of atonal beauty. My soul is conjugated. Armenia, you are a love song to me, beckoning history in my bones. Yanai, oh my dear, I am now listening. Okay, I thought just open up for questions, and I'm going to have some coffee while or maybe not. Maybe I do. I want just a little cream, and I'm just going to sit down. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So, any comments, questions, or?
Thank you, Celeste. And the music was amazing. I really loved that. And also the things that you said have
The music
such
is amazing. Thank you.
relevance.
All poetry should be read with dance or music.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just really
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
Celeste came into my class last night, the culture and dance class, and read poetry and then listened to music, and then the students actually talked about their own heritage and moved and danced some of it in a similar
Yeah.
way. It was really beautiful to transfer that to a really embodied understanding of what
Yeah.
you're talking about.
And it was interesting because, we often think of heritage, well, if we don't come from some really faraway place, it's like several Canadians said, well, it's bland. And I thought, well, nothing's bland. There's no bland, Everything has, meaning and value, So.
What struck me was when you were talking about how some things are too harsh, too difficult.
Yeah.
And you have to express them between the words.
Yeah.
And then, as you were saying that, I was thinking how wrong the lighting was in this room.
Yeah.
In the classroom space.
Yeah, all of our
For this
classrooms
kind
are
of
all,
learning,
yeah.
It's just wrong.
Well, I feel the same way. I just think I really should bring in dim lighting to my classes. I hate it. I can't, I think I'm allergic to like Safeway lighting and classroom lighting and, yeah. Because we don't really allow enough space to ponder. I mean, the reason that the poetic is interesting also even as a methodology is it allows you to have more space for the reader for a while. And we've taught in the academy that more is better. Like more words, more dense, let's have it more dense. Let's put every single, sometimes less is more. We have no space. There's no space for us to, we talk a lot about reflexivity, at least in our faculty. We eat and reflect. That's the two things that we often do. But we don't always have the space. And we often don't have the space in our language. And I just often feel that many of us have been hijacked by certain kinds of language and colonized by the language, which we are trying to fit into these boxes, but it really doesn't share the depths of the places that we actually really do travel. So I'm thankful that there are other articulations, but predominantly this is often, it's often a battle you have to keep fighting, so. Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing tonight?
Oh, tonight, yeah. Well, I'm going to just I'm creating a dance a little bit from the longing piece you did, and then I'm going to dance to the poem Beneath the Skin of Plum Black, which I actually didn't read you. And then I'm going to do a piece, it's a funny piece called The Spirituality of Worry, because my mother, like guilt, put worry, like my mother worried about, I'll end up doing the piece if I keep talking. Anyways, it's a piece about teaching the audience how to worry in case they don't know how to worry. And so I basically take them through, it's a performance piece, it's a funny piece that teaches them how to worry. Because it's very indicative of, I'm sure it is of many cultures, but it's very indicative of Armenian culture. You know, I said I would never become like my mother and worry. Well, I worry, you know, I worry about everything. So that's what I'm doing tonight. Yeah. And and there is an Armenian musician, and I think after opening remarks, yeah. So
Yeah. and
before the
I-
film series.
Yeah, I don't know, you probably have all been getting meet in the middle.
Yes,
Emails like
yes,
crazy.
yes,
Later
yes.
down, when I said I wasn't getting them, I realized I'm not scrolling down.
Oh,
No,
yeah, so
I'm
there's,
getting
there is this whole, Steve Beckett by Adam McGoyan is going up at the Mackenzie, and with that is a whole huge project that's celebrating Armenian culture and looking at migration and longing.
And trauma of all cultures is people, right? Yeah.
So Celeste is also on a panel, and I'm on it with her on Friday at 2:30. And speaking more about the work, and then
And
there's
the
an
process
Armenian
and the
film
work.
festival that opens tonight,
Yeah.
and then Celeste closes.
It's so ironic because, you know, I to come to have this in Saskatchewan is
Isn't
really
it great?
it's really interesting. But I think the more and more I think about it, the parallels between the indigenous populations and what happened in Armenia, and the other thing is the denial. The denial of it, what happened, or the denial of what the trauma caused, is a re-traumatization, right? I mean, that's not my field. I'm not in, you know, and so I can't speak to it theoretically in terms of, but I do know, I theorize with the flesh around it, that, you know, there's a lot there.
You know, that I was struck by that comment early on in your presentation. I want to thank you for it, because I had an experience last week at the Museum for Human Rights. I was with other deans of education
yes.
and a lot of Indigenous scholars as well, because our focus was on
Right.
truth and reconciliation.
Right.
And there is a gallery. I don't know if you've been to
I haven't. I
it.
really want to go. I've heard it's, yeah.
It's interesting. It's there are no artifacts really.
Yeah.
The stories are the
Yeah,
artifacts.
yeah.
Which is a very different approach to a museum experience.
Yeah.
But the gallery, there is a gallery specifically focused on
Yeah.
the 5 genocides.
Yeah.
Right? And these are the ones that the world has agreed we can call genocide. And residential schools and colonization and 60 Scoop and all of the experiences that Indigenous populations on this land have had are not represented
Yeah.
in that space.
Yeah.
And so one of the Indigenous scholars that I was walking with asked the guide about that, and he said, well, it's not considered, like it hasn't been given that name. We haven't agreed internationally that it's a genocide. And she said, let me tell you,
Right.
from my own lived experience,
Right.
it is a genocide.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
so that denial,
Yes.
so I saw that like living out loud in front of me,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
I just
It's
want
that
to-
denial.
Yeah.
I think that is, like, I have this real, I swear this has got to be my main issue. I can't stand if someone denies something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know, so there, it really, and it, there, so that is very true. I mean, they're not, by not claiming it as that,
Yeah.
it allows the, it doesn't, the import of it is not there.
Right, exactly.
And it can keep happening.
Yeah.
It can keep happening in the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And I think the re-traumatization isn't just for the people who were the victims. It's for humanity at
Yes.
large. And I think that
Yes.
that's, when we talk about the arts as being a means of expression of
Yeah.
the things that we hold in our body from other generations, that's really significant.
Yes.
And in addition to that, there's also, more than, not more, but in addition to expression, the arts also remind us. They remind us of what it is, what is humankind's process, and that is this continual adaptation and
Yeah.
movement in ways that don't separate out into traditional
Yeah.
conventional polarities.
Yeah.
So it's that opportunity to feel that kind of process, I guess, that we forget. So yeah, I just think the re-traumatization isn't just for the people who have already been re-traumatized. It's a continual re-traumatization of ourselves and how
Yes.
we live in the world.
Yes, it is. I think it takes more out on us than we can even comprehend.
And maybe our future generations.
In
will have
future
a sense of
generations,
that.
I know one of my sons is doing this work that's generational. I haven't done it, but there is this kind of psychological kind of work that you look back at many of the generations, that you actually literally hold generational kinds of trauma in you, and he's like working through all this, which is like so like wild, in some ways. But I know that it will open up huge places, because in some ways it becomes many of our life work to go through that, And it sets up all kinds of patterns. I know personally, it's set up patterns for me that have been very, very difficult. I'm sure that, things that even partners I chose had to connect to this process. It was a lot of personal work and understanding to get free, to come to. So it's all connected. Everything's connected, We're not disconnected from it, so. Yeah.
Well, your work is a gift. So
Okay.
thank
Oh,
you.
you're very welcome.
Celeste.
Thank you. Thank you for, I really appreciate you all being here, and your presence is very meaningful to me. And thank you.
I'm sure everyone did.
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely
So,
noon hour.
and so I've kind of come out to the Armenian, I've been sending those poems, sometimes they're in other educational journals, but I've been trying to put them into Armenian journals as well, and so I can kind of enter that wider community there, so, yeah.
And can we look at your book?
Oh, yeah, look at it, and and I really love the cover. It's my friend Mary Blaze, who's an artist, and she went back to art school at 60. She was a nurse, and she's 80 now. So I'm like, okay, 80, yes, 80 is the new 60, so yeah, so go ahead, and
Can you tell me how to spell the name of the first musician?
it's Armen, Armen.
Oh, okay.
Armen Shakmakian. It's Chakmakian. And this song is called Ceremonies, and it's a beautiful YouTube video of it being in Armenia with Dijan Kaspavarian, who's a very well-known duduk player. Duduk is a very old, ancient wooden instrument. So in Armenia, there's very, very ancient instruments, the duduk and the oud. And the oud is also, some of these instruments they're also Turkish. So, there's also, it's interesting, I'm saying an aside, my mother would I could never go to any Turkish people because the Turkish, first some of my closest friends are Turkish. And they're all wanting, yes, we want the Armenian genocide recognized, but because the cultures are very similar, it's very interesting. So, yeah, that's a wonderful YouTube to look at, yeah. Yeah, so you've got your fill of Armenian. This is so you'll be all, if anyone goes from Meet Me in the Middle, just I know all this stuff now about Armenian. Yeah.
That's great. Who were you quoting when you said, when you touch 1,000 places, you'll feel at home?
When I was so hilarious, I went on this tour of Armenia, so I thought, oh yes, there's going to be I'll meet 30 people, they'll all be Armenian. There was one Armenian, which was me, there was 28 Dutch people and one German, and this German fellow told me that. Yes, yeah, but they were all, there's an Armenian folk dance is really big in the Netherlands. And so, Armenian folk dance, I didn't learn, my cousins know all this stuff. In fact, I had to text my cousin in Boston, I'm looking for the translation of this, tell me what it is. Armenian folk dance is a really big deal all over the place. And so it's a lot of folk dance communities will learn those dances. And I've had a knee replacement and I have really bad knees, so I can't do a lot of the dances they all start, but it's all the free Armenian dance, which I love. We could all do that. It's all this kind of lovely stuff. Yeah. Yeah. So that's why all these Dutch people were, So, and I'm like going on this bus having these deep visceral reactions and like, oh my gosh, and they're just, it's not reacting to it. They're coming from in a very different perspective, and I'm like, oh, what have I got myself into? I can't believe this. I got a shirt grant to do this, and this is not really how I thought it would come up. Yeah.
Very contained.
What? I was like, can imagine? I'm like all over like this. And it was like, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. It's not my idea. I wanted to go here all my life, and oh gosh. But I think because it couldn't be contained, it made me write, but they did have a great love. And the tour guide, who was Dutch, was totally fluent in Armenian. And here I am, I could hardly. And it took me 2 weeks just to learn how to say thank you. Shnor lakalatun. I mean,
Wow, a lot of extra syllables.
yeah, so, I didn't learn the language. Like, I don't understand. Like, you kids in these schools today, they know 3-4 languages. Everyone's bilingual. It's like pathetic. I only know like English and poetry and dance. I don't know like English and French and Armenian. Anyways. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Being a great audience.
Do we need to put these tables back?
Can I have a quick peek in the book?